Hi, my name is Rob Shepard, pastor of East Sherman Baptist Church, and I want to thank you for connecting with us through our website today. I pray that this message is an encouragement to you, and I invite you to experience worship with us live every Sunday morning at 10:15. East Sherman is a church devoted to knowing Jesus, growing in Jesus, and showing Jesus to others. May the Lord richly bless you as you listen to the preaching of His Word.
Amen. There you go, RC. Knew I could count on you. Turn with me, if you will, to the book of Exodus. Exodus chapter 17. Exodus chapter 17. We're going to be covering a couple of chapters this morning. And before you think to yourself, I'm going to be here until 3 o'clock. We won't be covering each and every verse in these two chapters. Exodus chapter 17 and 18, but we will be pulling from both of them. We're in the middle of our series entitled God Calls, God Provides, God Fulfills. And we have been discussing, in essence, the life and the ministry and the leadership of Moses. And here in chapters 17 and 18, we find Moses in a very interesting situation. Moses had been carrying the burden of leading the children of Israel through some extremely stressful, momentous, awe-inspiring, consequential times. The Hebrews had been through so much during Moses' term as leader, general, and prophet. Now they were free. And Moses has a very interesting encounter with his father-in-law, Jethro. While with Moses, Jethro sees some things that concern him greatly. What we learn in this passage has much to do with the proper way to lead, the proper way to delegate, the proper way to live. How many of us here, I know I've asked this in the past, how many of us, if asked the question, would you like to succeed in life? How many of us would say no? I'll take a pass on that. I'd rather flounder. I'd rather fail. I'd rather fall flat on my face. I would rather not achieve much. No, we all want to succeed. We all want to thrive. We all want to do some big and bold things. We all want to leave a legacy of success, spiritual and otherwise. And here, Moses, in leading the people of Israel, Moses, in my view, after reading and studying these two passages, these two chapters, he's on the verge of a breakdown. He is on the verge of a breakdown. Now, again, each and every one of us, myself included, we know exactly what that's like. We are stretched too thin, the burden's too heavy, the workload is too costly, we throw up our hands and we say, I give, Uncle, I'm done. Moses found himself in that very situation. The first thing I want you to take note of this morning is this. Moses was on the verge of a leadership crisis. Moses was on the verge of a leadership crisis. Look with me first in chapter 17, starting in verse number 2. Therefore the people quarreled with Moses. And we've seen that a lot in these preceding chapters, haven't we? The people quarreling with Moses, the people questioning Moses, the people literally telling Moses, you brought us here to leave us to die. And just a short time before, they were in slavery, they were in bondage, and here they are free. And once again, we hear the familiar refrain. The people quarreled with Moses. Moses, their appointed leader, Moses, the one who God had chosen from the backside of the desert. Moses, the one who had freed them from slavery, the one who God used to bring them through the Red Sea. Here, once again, the people quarrel with Moses. We hear that often in the preceding chapters and here again in chapter 17. Therefore the people quarreled with Moses and said, give us water that we may drink. Again, we've heard that before. And Moses said to them, "Why do you quarrel with me? Why do you test the Lord?" But the people thirsted there for water, and they grumbled against Moses and said, "Why now have you brought us up from Egypt to kill us and our children and our livestock with thirst?" A bit dramatic, are we? These same individuals are now receiving manna from heaven, quail. They have seen God turn sour water into sweet water. They have experienced the mighty wonders of God. By this time, you would think that they are very well acquainted with what God can do and what God has done. And yet again, we see them go before Moses, accuse him of wanting them dead, and questioning his leadership, questioning their God, and saying, "Moses, you brought us here to perish." A bit dramatic. Again, sounds a lot like what I hear out of my kids after Sunday morning worship service. We are so hungry. We're going to die. We can't make it home. We got to stop at McDonald's. Just a tad dramatic. You know me too well, brother. So Moses, verse 4, cried out to the Lord, saying, "What shall I do to this people?" Interesting that he doesn't say, "What shall I do for this people?" No, he's got one thing on his mind. What am I going to do to them? I am done with these people. What am I going to do to these people? A little more, and they will stone me. Moses is at his wit's end. "Why do you quarrel with me?" is a question he asks. And then he goes to the Lord, "What shall I do to this people?" He's reaching his breaking point. There has been more grumbling, more complaining about water. And then in verses 8 through 13, we see a battle with Amalek. And I want you to take note of this. In verse number 8 of chapter 17, look there with me. Then Amalek came and fought against Israel at Rephidim. So Moses said to Joshua, "Choose men for us and go out, fight against Amalek." So on the heels of yet again another complaining session, another session where the people are doubting God, now they've got to go out and fight an enemy. Keep in mind, Israel is not a quote-unquote nation. They don't have any warriors right now. They don't have a standing army. They've got nothing. But they're about to embark and engage in a battle against a well-armed army. "Choose men for us and go out and fight against Amalek. Tomorrow I will station myself on the top of the hill with the staff of God in my hand." Joshua did as Moses told him and fought against Amalek. And Moses, Aaron, and Hur went up to the top of the hill. So it came about when Moses held his hand up that Israel prevailed, and when he let his hand down, Amalek prevailed. But Moses' hands were heavy. Then they took a stone and put it under him, and he sat on it, and Aaron and Hur supported his hands, one on one side and one on the other. Thus his hands were steady until the sunset. So Joshua overwhelmed Amalek and his people with the edge of the sword. So we see the people grumbling, and then we see Moses so exhausted by this battle. The battle lasted so long that he could not physically hold his hands up. The burden became too much for him. They literally had to force him to sit down, and they had to prop his hands up, Hur and Aaron, to keep him in place. The burden was too heavy for him to carry alone. He had to have assistance. And then turn with me over to chapter 18, verses 13 through 16. Another example here of the high price of leadership and the reason why we see Moses is on the verge of a leadership crisis. In verse number 13 of chapter 18, the Word of God says, "It came about the next day that Moses sat to judge the people, and the people stood about Moses from morning until evening. Now when Moses' father-in-law saw all that he was doing for the people, he said, 'What is this thing that you are doing for the people? Why do you alone sit as judge, and all the people stand about you from morning until evening?'" Verse 15, listen to what Moses says. "Moses said to his father-in-law, 'Because the people come to me to inquire of God. When they have a dispute, it comes to me, and I judge between a man and his neighbor and make known the statutes of God and his laws.'" We see Moses as leader. We see Moses as spiritual leader. We see Moses as prophet. We see Moses as general. And here we see Moses as judge. Talk about spreading yourself too thin. And the answer to Jethro here is, they come to me. They expect it from me. They inquire of me. Therefore, I feel like I have to take it upon myself to do this thing. To conduct my ministry, to conduct my life in this way, because it is expected of me. Moses here is spreading himself too thin. He's taking on too much responsibility. And in some cases, you can even argue that Moses is micromanaging the situation. That is a real danger, not just for those of us in vocational ministry, but for each and every person sitting in this worship center today. We take on too much, we do too much, we conduct our lives in a fifth gear at all times. We don't sit back, we don't delegate, we don't allow someone else to serve us. We've got to be the one serving, we've got to be the one doing, we've got to be the one engaged in the battle at all times, every time. And at the end of the day, we are spent. Physically, spiritually, emotionally, we are sapped. What good are we at that point? Moses here is certainly reaching a breaking point. He is refusing to say enough is enough. He was attempting to meet the people's every expectation. He was convinced that if he refused to do it, no one else would. And we can look at this passage and we can question and wonder, okay, why did this happen? Why did Moses get to this point? How did he allow himself to reach this breaking point? It may be the result of pride. Maybe Moses is thinking, I'm indispensable. It cannot happen without me. If I remove myself, everything's going to implode. Because I am irreplaceable. I'm indispensable. I'm the one God called. This isn't in the Word of God, but I can hear God come back to him and say, yeah, I called you to lead my people out of bondage. I didn't call you to set in judgment. Could have been fear. Moses is thinking, it won't get done. Nobody else will step up. I am fearful of what will happen if I remove myself from the situation. Or maybe it's selfishness. I want to be the CEO. I want to be the commander-in-chief. I want to do this. Now, in Moses' case, there's really no evidence of him being that type of individual, that type of selfish person that just wants all the glory to himself and doesn't want to share with anyone else. We don't get that portrait of Moses. But in our own lives, how often do we engage in similar behavior? We accrue all the power. We want all the status. We want all the reward. We want everything so people will heap praise upon us. So people will think we are better than we are. So people will look at us and think to themselves, I want to be like him. I want to be like her. It's not about bringing God glory. It's about bringing ourselves glory. And it leads to crisis in our lives. Moses here was on the verge of a leadership crisis. Secondly, Moses chose to hearken to a wise voice. What I find fascinating about this passage is Moses didn't break down. He was on the verge of breaking down, but he didn't break down. He got out of the ditch. He didn't stay in the ditch. He didn't wallow in the muck. He didn't allow himself to continue to spiral out of control. He didn't lash out. He didn't get angry with God. He didn't get belligerent with the people of Israel. No, he hearkened to a wise voice because at the right time, God brought him someone to speak truth into his heart, into his life. And God will do the same thing for you if you allow him to do it. If you are sensitive to the Spirit's leading as Moses was. So I want you to look with me just briefly at verses 17 through 27 of chapter 18. And we'll pick up with the rest of the story. Moses' father-in-law said to him, listen to his response. The thing that you are doing is not good. He sees Moses sitting in judgment, playing the role of judge, seeing everybody from dusk till dawn, or from dawn till dusk, however that works. He witnesses this. Jethro witnesses this. And the first thing he tells Moses is, the thing that you are doing is not good. You will surely wear out both yourself and these people who are with you. For the task is too heavy for you. You cannot do it alone. Now listen to me. I will give you counsel, and God be with you. You be the people's representative before God. And you bring the disputes to God. Then teach them the statutes and the laws, and make known to them the way in which they are to walk, and the work they are to do. Verse 21. Furthermore, you shall select out of all the people able men who fear God, men of truth, those who hate dishonest gain, and you shall place these over them as leaders of thousands, of hundreds, of fifties, of tens. Let them judge the people at all times, and let it be that every major dispute they will bring to you, but every minor dispute they themselves will judge. So it will be easier for you, and they will bear the burden with you. Everybody say, with you. They will bear that burden with you. If you do this thing, and God commands, and God so commands you, then you will be able to endure, and all these people also will go to their place in peace. So Moses listened to his father-in-law and did all that he had said. Moses chose able men out of all Israel and made them heads over the people, leaders of thousands, of hundreds, of fifties, and of tens. They judged the people at all times. The difficult dispute they would bring to Moses, but every minor dispute they themselves would judge. Then Moses bade his father-in-law farewell, and he went his way into his own land. We see here Moses hearkened. He chose to hearken to a wise voice, and that voice was the voice of his father-in-law. His father-in-law instructed Moses to first reach out to others. Reach out to others for wise counsel. Jethro witnessed what was transpiring in the life and ministry of Moses, and he said, that thing you are doing is not good. You will surely wear out. You will break down. You will give in. Jethro was clear in his counsel. He was honest in his assessment. You're going to burn out. He was genuinely concerned about his son-in-law. He basically said, Moses, you need help. You need help. You need some assistance. Moses, I've seen what's going on. You're going to neglect your family. You're going to give up your family to attempt to serve these people day and night, 24/7. It's not going to get any easier. It's not going to get any easier for you to bear this burden. And eventually, Moses, you are telling you, I love you too much to allow this to continue. Moses, perhaps Jethro even said, I've been where you're at. I understand ministry, Moses. I'm a priest, Jethro could have said. I understand the demands that are upon you. But Moses, you've got to back away. You've got to let go. You've got to hold on to this ministry loosely and give it to the Lord and trust that He will bring additional leaders your way. He was genuinely concerned, and he didn't merely complain or condemn, but Jethro had an alternative proposal. We see that in verses 19 through 23. Moses, you handle the major disputes. You teach the people as you have the law of God and what God expects and how God demands that they live. You continue to do that. But you find for yourself leaders. And leaders who are good, honest, godly men. And you place them in charge of a group. And you let them judge and lead that group. And if they can't handle it, if the dispute is too heavy, too large, then it escalates to you. We see Moses was obviously listening. Jethro witnessed what was transpiring. Jethro also understood if nothing was done here, Moses was going to burn out. He was going to become frustrated. He was going to become discouraged. And eventually Moses would fail. I go back to the way we started this sermon this morning. How many of us would choose to fail? How many of us in our lives have ever made that conscious decision going into a game, going into a sporting event, going into life, going into a job or a career? My goal here is to fail in spectacular fashion. I want to leave this place with everybody knowing that Rob Shepard is the biggest, boldest failure that there has ever been. We don't ever go into any area of our life with that thought. However, a good way to fail in life, a great way to fail in ministry or in a career, is to attempt to micromanage every aspect, take on too much responsibility, spread yourself too thin, and you will fail. Jethro understood that. And he takes that message to Moses. Jethro's relationship with Moses permitted him to take this action, to have this difficult conversation with Moses. How many of us would say that we enjoy getting unsolicited advice from someone we don't know or someone we have very little regard for? Someone we know we can't trust. Perhaps someone we know is trying to undermine or undercut us. None of us want that kind of advice. We may be polite, shake our head, yeah, thank you for bringing that to my attention. And as soon as that person leaves, I know what they're up to. I know what their game is. However, Jethro had a relationship with Moses that allowed him to speak truth into Moses' life and allowed Moses to receive it as it was intended. Everyone in this room this morning needs a Jethro. They need someone who can speak unvarnished, sometimes unpleasant truth into their life. And when things aren't rosy, when the sun isn't shining, perhaps when we've done things that we shouldn't do, that person has authority to come to us and say, Rob, you blew it, and this is why. Or Rob, you're about to bomb, and this is the reason why. Rob, you're not doing good, and here is why. We all need a Jethro. And over the course of my almost 5 years, if you can believe it, here at East Sherman, I finally had a couple Jethros in my life that have full authority to come to me about anything and say, Rob, this is what I'm seeing out of you. You need to change in this respect. Or Rob, you're about to step off a cliff. Here's what I see. It's critical that each one of us have a Jethro or a couple Jethros in our life that can speak that way to us. And we know they have our back. We know we can trust them. We know they have our best interests at heart. And that's what Moses had in Jethro. Look with me at verse number 9 of chapter 18. Jethro rejoiced over all the goodness which the Lord had done to Israel in delivering them from the hand of the Egyptians. So Jethro said, "Blessed be the Lord who delivered you from the hand of the Egyptians and from the hand of Pharaoh, and who delivered the people from under the hand of the Egyptians. Now I know that the Lord is greater than all the gods. Indeed, it was proven when they dealt proudly against the people." Then Jethro, Moses' father-in-law, took a burnt offering and sacrifices for God. And Aaron came with all the elders of Israel to eat a meal with Moses' father-in-law before God. So Moses encounters Jethro. And it's like old times. They embrace, they hug, they rejoice. They sit down. And this passage tells us that Moses begins to recount all of the things that God had done in delivering the children of Israel from the Egyptians. And his father-in-law is sitting there taking it all in. And after Moses is done, then he starts rejoicing with Moses. Sincerely rejoicing in Moses and what God had done through Moses and what God had done for the children of Israel. It was sincere, it was heartfelt, it was real. So it's obvious from this passage, Moses trusted Jethro. They built a solid relationship with one another. And Moses respected him enough to recount all that God had done. This tells me one thing only. We, today, we are dependent upon one another. Moses was dependent upon Jethro. Jethro was his elder. Jethro was obviously the father of his wife. You and I need each other. So often, church families, yes, I use that term intentionally. We are a family of believers. We are not strangers. We are a family of believers. We are dependent upon one another to live this Christian life, to succeed in what God has called us to individually and collectively. We are dependent upon one another for love, for mutual respect. We are dependent upon one another for prayer. And when we allow Satan in the back door to disrupt our church family, to wreak havoc on our lives spiritually, to start sowing seeds of discontent, that begins to fray our family. That creates discord, disunity, distrust. And before you know it, a family of believers that was living in harmony, that was spirit-filled, that was on fire for God, we now see that they are at war with one another, and it is total, mutually assured destruction. We go nuclear with one another. Now, praise be His name, that's not going on here right now. But if we're honest with one another, this past year has been stressful in the life of this church. We've made some huge decisions in this church. Decisions that will affect our future. For not just 6 months or a year, but for many years to come. Now more than ever, we need one another. Just as Moses needed Jethro, we need one another. We are dependent upon one another. We must begin mentoring one another. We must begin discipling one another. That's one of the things we're going to focus on in this new year, is discipleship and intentional mentoring. I need you guys. I need each and every one of you to come alongside me. And when I can't do it anymore, lift my arm.
I pray that this message was an encouragement to you. If you would like to know more about Jesus or would simply like someone to pray with you, please feel free to contact us through email, phone, or I would encourage you to engage in worship with us every Sunday morning at 10:15. We also have Sunday evening services at 6:30 and a Wednesday evening prayer time at 6:30. May the Lord richly bless you this week.